is your death!
So, I guess you're staying. Perhaps I was unclear.
Enough words! Show yourself, samurai, so you can die!
Very well. The decisions you make and the actions that follow are a reflection of who you really are.
This is Samurai Jack. It's a beautiful show. Now, what I'm saying here isn't exactly new. It's something that's been talked about in every review since the show started in 2001. I could go on and on about how the colors play with the light in a way that you don't generally see in animation, or how advancements in technology have provided the show a crisper image, but I'm not going to do that. I think they really speak for themselves. What I don't think people mention is how these visuals work. So that's what I want to talk about today. How these visuals work and how they tell a story. Because in Samurai Jack, visual language is as much a storyteller as anything else. I'm only going to be talking about the rebooted 5th season that aired this year. You don't need to have seen the original series to appreciate the newest season. It's pretty straightforward. Don't worry, I'm going to steer clear of any significant spoilers, but at the end, I'm going to give my thoughts on the finale and what I think could have been done differently. So if you're interested in that, stick around to the end. I'm Jackson, and this is Ideas at Play. So what do I mean when I talk about visual language? What I'm actually talking about is the idea of semiotics. Now, semiotics is a complicated subject, and it's very easy to get sucked into, so I'm just going to give you the quick bullet points before we jump into how it applies to Samurai Jack. Here, I'll even put 30 seconds on the clock. Okay, here we go. Semiotics is the study of the meaning behind symbols, images, and words. It's the baggage that every symbol or word carries with it. Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure explained it like this. There's the vessel of a message, the signifier, and the message it conveys, the signified. So, for example, a red traffic light is a signifier. It doesn't inherently mean anything by itself, but in our culture, it signifies stop. These two ideas are packaged together in what's called a sign. But most signs aren't cut and dry. If we just change the red light to a yellow one, some people might think speed up, and others might think slow down. So back to Samurai Jack. How does this kind of thing weasel its way into a cartoon? The answer starts with character. If you've seen the show, you know that there's not a lot of dialogue in Samurai Jack.
What do I like most about voicing Jack? It's the easiest job in show business. He says like 4 lines. Then there'll be like some other guy's like, well, let me explain the whole plot of the story. And I just go, I see. I will find it. And then I'm done.
In much of TV, we read into the subtext of what a character says and does to figure out who they are. But in a world where the main characters don't say much, the creators use signifiers in each character's appearance. Aku is the shape-shifting master of darkness. His body is two-dimensional in a way that is visibly both dark and powerful. The daughters of Aku shed his sense of humor, and with it, his expressive face, donning blank masks devoid of the literal fire in his eyes. Aku's future, one of industry and machinery overwhelming nature, is full of spires and towers that resemble antennae. The majority of Jack's opponents are robots, and while that allowed for violence in the PG setting of the show's original run, it also stood to show us who the true enemy of Samurai Jack is. And not coincidentally, a lot of these robots are bugs, and what's signified is the idea of an infestation. But in this season, no character has as much visual information signified by their appearance than Jack himself. He looks vastly different from the clean-cut samurai of 13 years ago. Gone is the measured, balanced approach to fighting, replaced instead by a warrior who has embraced the wilderness he finds himself lost in. Wrapping Jack in guns, a motorcycle, and the world that he fights against tells us a lot about how Jack has changed and lost his way. And his journey is told visually as he is stripped down in clothing and philosophy and forced to confront his basic self and determine who he wants to be. Obviously, just like in any kind of animation, this visual language can find a close parallel in comic books and manga. But I've never seen this kind of parallel so apparent than in Samurai Jack. In some ways, the show strives to be a comic book more than a TV show. Aspect ratios change in irregular shapes to mimic the panels of a comic book and mine drama and visual language from every single resource available. This looks really cool, and different from anything else on TV, but there's a lot more to it than that. It directs our eyes in ways that a lot of TV doesn't. Cuts from shot to shot carry with them a kinetic energy, and feel like deliberate choices rather than the simple assembly of the story. And by using this visual language, Samurai Jack is utilizing the signifiers of all stories that are usually presented this way, particularly the superhero genre. Jack is a superhero by all accounts. He stands for absolute good, and his fighting ability is so elite that he is unbeatable. But in this season, we see a superhero who has lost his way. With all paths to the past out of reach, he's lost his mission. Sure, there have been dark superhero stories a lot recently, But when have we seen a superhero been forced to live out that failure? Jack's entire purpose for going on has vanished, and yet he is unable to fade away.
50 years have passed, but I do not age.
This kind of visual storytelling places us directly into the mind of Jack, and that's what I think takes the show to the next level. Animation can unlock minds in a way that really isn't comparable in live-action television. Internal conflicts are made physical, vivid, and real through stylized hand-drawn artwork. While film can come close because of its budget, they're still confined by this photorealism. It's difficult to make something in live action this stylized without it looking hokey or cheesy. Samurai Jack doesn't have any such restrictions. Shapes and colors can become warped and twisted to display the emotions surrounding a character's mind without ever needing to explain that it's a hallucination, dream, or vision. Without knowing anything about the show, there is so much information conveyed about Jack's internal conflict visually in his moments of solitude. We can see him arguing with a warped, angry ghost version of his past self, and that tells us more than just the idea that he's at odds with himself, but that his past and present are grappling over his future. We can see that his father's torture weighs on him as well, and there's a strong visual metaphor that the past he's seeking to regain burns before his eyes as it slips further and further into the past. We don't know what this character is for a while into the series, but we can make a lot of inferences about a generic ghost samurai that waits in a graveyard-like fog just beyond the frame. The comic book genre isn't the only one that's called upon for visual language and signifiers either. When we see Jack like this in the original series, what's being referenced very clearly is the Western genre of American film. And it's not just the hat. We see shots that harken back to classic Westerns, and while we don't have time to go into the lengthy shared history between these two genres, let's just say that combining them is not an accident. And by juxtaposing these two sets of signifiers, the show is presenting two major conflicts: East versus West, and old versus new. We see it everywhere in the show. Jack balancing between these two concepts, teetering back and forth between being more samurai or more cowboy, and the things that those symbols represent. Is he a product of his past, or has he become part of this reality? The concept of old and new is present in a lot of adult animation as well, and by gearing Samurai Jack away from the more PG and kid-friendly original run and towards a more violent and dark show on Adult Swim, it's putting itself decidedly in that genre and creating a dialogue with it. All of a sudden, it leaves the realm of the Powerpuff Girls and enters the modern world of Rick and Morty and Bojack Horseman.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die.
Closure is a made-up thing by Steven Spielberg to sell movie tickets. It's like true love and the Munich Olympics doesn't exist in the real world.
Aku's grasp chokes the past, present, and future. Hope is lost.
Samurai Jack has grown up a lot in the last 13 seasons, and in many ways, they've used that absence, that time, as the conflict, both thematically and visually. And that brings us to the ending of the series. So if you don't want spoilers, I'll see you next time. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. And for the rest of you, here we go. I thought that the strongest thing that this season had going for it was that it was all about Jack learning that although his mission had changed, it wasn't over. That was the message in the graveyard where Jack contemplates ritual suicide, and what brings him back from the brink is the knowledge of all the people that he has helped, that he has not failed. This was a huge moment in the series, not just because of the heavy subject matter, but because it embodied the internal struggle of East versus West and old versus new. He doesn't just choose to live in this scene. He also chooses to forsake the old ways of the warrior and reject the ghosts of his ancestors to continue on a new journey. Or at least I thought. And that's what brings me to where I think the series misstepped. In episode 7, when Jack regains his sword. This episode is all about rebirth and redefining identity. Ashi first risks her life and betrays her past by fighting for Jack, before completing her rebirth by killing the symbol of that past, her mother. Meanwhile, Jack faces his inner demons and finds balance within himself, regaining his sword. It was a truly awesome episode, but I was sad to say goodbye to the bearded samurai. As I mentioned before, Jack's appearance carries with it a ton of signifiers, so turning him back to the samurai from the original run was telling, and ultimately a choice I think sent the show down the wrong path. Fast forward to the end, and Jack is able to get back to the past through some narrative necessity, and he erases Aku's reign of terror along with everything we ever saw in the show. I'm not saying that this bothered me from a fan service perspective, but what did bother me is that his inner battle with himself was lessened. The hero's journey is all about a change within a character, allowing them to finish their quest. But what changed within Jack? He never actually had to become anything else. Yes, he had his heart broken, but love wasn't the only thing that allowed him to defeat Aku. It was also the struggle with his loss of purpose. Otherwise, why would we spend so much time with it? Instead, Jack's journey ended right where it started, in time, place, and character. This whole video has been about visual signifiers and how they can tell a story just as strongly as any other narrative device. So, I'll leave you with this thought. What if Jack had emerged from his inner battle as something that combined these two selves, the well-kept traditionalist and the tested, battle-worn warrior? Do you think he still would have traveled back to the past? Or would he have had to defeat Aku in the present? Would he have pressed the reset button? Or would he have had to create a new world, a new purpose? However you choose to answer those questions, the answers are all there in plain sight. Thank you so much for watching. As always, like, subscribe, and share this video wherever you'd like. I've been teasing doing this video on my Patreon newsletter for a little while now. It's something that I release to my patrons every month, and it includes a lot of writing about tons of TV shows I probably never will be able to make a video about. So swing over there and help support my videos and get that added perk.